We were fun of CTAs, and as an analyst, that was part of my job, was reading the Fed tea leaves, reading the Bank of Japan tea leaves. We trade a lot of currency markets, and so I would go to the large, prominent chief investment officers of these massive commodity trading advising funds, and ask them. It was 2012, 2013, so right when Yellen was coming in, into the Fed as chairwoman. We were going through Operation Twist and then the beginning of QE2. And as a young analyst at 21, 22, I was asking these CIOs naively, and just thinking back, like the fact that I had the balls, like ask these CIOs these questions, like, you guys worried about like the Fed's manipulation of markets? And they all hand waved it away. And so like after Greenspan had put the put in place, it had become normalized by that point in 2012, 2013. And it was just sort of the expected way that things operate at that point. And to me, as a young man who lived through the great financial crisis, that intuitively just did not make sense to me. That around that same time is when I found Bitcoin and decided to really dive down that rabbit hole, because I had the juxtaposition of Fed policy with Bitcoin, which has this hardened policy embedded in the protocol, and it just made a lot more intuitive sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, 0809 was interesting. I mean, I had left Wall Street at the time. I worked as an investment banker for a while, starting in 2001 when I graduated business school, and then was following the 0809 crisis pretty closely. I don't think anyone, and certainly myself included, expected to see the amount of money that the Fed printed and the levels they went to bail out the financial system in that time period.
Yeah, and it's had
enormous impact,
many perverse effects, which is what we're here to talk about. You wrote this incredible piece on Substack. What was it, about this time last year, maybe?
When was it? It was April 11th of last year. It's almost exactly a year, 11 months. Yeah, but it's something I had written. I wrote a lot about economics for the last 15 or 20 years. I had a blog that called ibankingfaq.com, which was at the time, this goes back 15, 20 years, a site for undergraduates and MBA students trying to break into investment banking, and sort of a Q&A, an FAQ on what investment bankers do and the interview questions that you get asked. And then I started to think, well, I should do the same thing for economics. And so I launched a site called Economics FAQ. My goal at the beginning was to try to answer all the, Econ 101 type of questions. And I have a very different view of Econ 101 than most economists. And I didn't really have the time to do that. And then I just kind of started writing longer pieces about economics. And I'm very critical of obviously the Fed, but also of mainstream economics, both micro and macro and behavioral economics. And then so I've been writing about
the best place to buy Bitcoin. Go to river.com/TFTC, sign up today, set up an account, and start stacking sats. Back to
this stuff for a long time, and with a very sort of free market libertarian bent to everything, Austrian economics, I would say, really. And then when the whole woke stuff started, and I getting aside, but I wrote a letter that helped ignite what became the parents movement 3 years ago in the fight against woke education. And I've lived and breathed kind of the last 3 years of this woke stuff. And something that I've thought about for a long time is that, it's really money and central banking policy that was at the root cause of the woke takeover of society, of the world, really. So, and there, it's a complicated argument, which, we can talk about the different aspects of it, but I really believe it's the incentives that easy money has changed in the world that created so many, not all, but so many of the issues that we have today.
Yeah. And I think for the first 10 years that I've been in Bitcoin, a lot of the focus of easy money has really been focused on the wealth disparity that it's created in the country, the Cantillon effect.
Yep.
That's really what a lot of Bitcoiners and me personally have focused on. I've been writing a newsletter and doing this podcast for 7 years now. So for a vast majority leading up to 2020, it was all focused on the perverse incentives of money printing on the wealth disparity and its effect on asset prices. But I think what you really hone in on your piece, and I think what many more people become more privy to, it's like much more pernicious than this wealth gap. It actually has social effects as well.
Well, yeah, no, I think, I came at this, and I think that's exactly right, because I wrote a piece for the Economics FAQ blog years ago. What are the root cause of income inequality? Income inequality is sort of an issue of the left, and they blame capitalism. And the right says, no, it's not so bad. We don't really have it. And I think that's wrong. I think income inequality, I said pre-woke, pre-2020, that income inequality and this wealth disparity that you refer to is really the greatest problem affecting America and probably the world. And I wrote this, I think it was like a 20,000 word piece on that the root cause of income inequality is easy money, is the Federal Reserve and the other central banks of the world. And so this piece about, how woke took over America, first part of that story is exactly the income inequality and the wealth disparity aspect of this. So I think that's a key part of the message, because and we can talk about what the mechanism is for why the income inequality increased and the wealth disparity increased, but one of the ways that the left gets people to go woke or to let me take one step back. I mean, I define woke differently than I think most people. Most people think it's just this idea that there needs to be, we have systemic racism, social justice, we need equity to kind of remedy that. And I believe woke is fundamentally a rejection of America's founding values. It's a rejection of free speech, a rejection of free markets and capitalism, rejection of individual rights and meritocracy, a rejection of objectivity. But if you really want to boil down what woke is, some people call it Marxism. I would argue it's not exactly Marxism. It's an update or offshoot of Marxism. It's really anti-capitalism. And the reason that the left is able to get so many people, especially young people, on their side is because of the wealth disparity and because of the income inequality. And they say, well, it's capitalism that doesn't work. It's capitalism that has created this, unfair system we have, especially for young people. I think it is an unfair system. I think it is a big problem of wealth disparity and income inequality. But again, my view is that the root cause is not capitalism. It's the failure to have capitalism. And the most important reason why we don't have capitalism is because of the central bank. By controlling interest rates, which is the most important price in the economy, the price of money. And so I came about this, before I was writing about woke, was writing about how, the Fed was the biggest and most important cause of the wealth disparity, of income inequality.
And to the Marxist offshoots credit, it is a really potent approach to convincing people that it's capitalism's fault. You really corrupt capitalism at its core with the price of money via the manipulation of interest rates by central banks, and then you lead everybody like a Pied Piper and just point at the wealth disparity and say, this is capitalism, this is capitalism. It's like we don't live in a capitalist society from a first principles perspective.
That's exactly right. From a first principles perspective, we don't. And not only because of central banking controlling interest rates, but because of regulations, because of unions, because of other things as well. But the biggest factor by far is the manipulation of interest rates.
Money is literally the most important tool that we use. It's 1/2 of every transaction. It's pretty important thing.
And I think, it's in some ways, I mean, you probably talk about this every week. I mean, in some ways, money is simple. It's stuff we can use to buy things. Economists have, more complex definitions, unit of exchange, store value, whatever. But effectively, money is something you could use, to buy things with. But it's on the other hand, it's kind of much more complex. And I think so very, very few people, even economists, understand how important it is, how important interest rates are, what the true drivers of inflation are, what the mechanism is for, money creation, which is, much more by the commercial banking system than it is by the Fed. And this is why it's not just simply the Fed having low interest rates. That's only part of the story. It's this Fed not willing to let banks fail and not willing to let the financial system fail.